Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, keynote speaker, strategist, and your chief shark officer. So how are you and your brand going to stand out? When competition is tougher than ever, competing on price or product isn't what it used to be. But how do you stand out in a crowded marketplace that is constantly evolving? Are you creating a remarkable experience with what your brand has to offer? Is it an experience maker or breaker? Dan Gingiss is a keynote speaker, customer experience coach, and the author of The Experience Maker, How to Create Remarkable Experiences That Your Customers Can't Wait to Share. And on this episode, we'll discuss customer experience, how to leverage CX in your marketing, price versus an experience, social media metrics, personalization, making experience more witty, immersive, shareable, extraordinary, and responsive, pain points, sparklers versus candles, a Tex-Mex restaurant and some so-so reviews, ever forward with Ann Handley, CX for pets, a 10-day challenge, a Shark Tank experience story, difficult mixed drinks, Chicago baseball, and a lot more. So let's tune in to an experience-making Dan with an experience-making shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you will, tell us a little bit about your story and your career to date.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Kenneth. I appreciate it. I'm a 20-year marketer from corporate America. I spent time at McDonald's, Discover, Humana, got my start in direct mail and worked all the way up to all the digital channels, email, social media, search, etc. And then kind of realized, had an epiphany that if I never created another marketing campaign again, it was going to be too soon. And that the actual best way to create the kind of marketing that all marketers are looking for, which is word of mouth, was actually to focus on customer experience instead. And so I started thinking about how do we focus people more on our existing customers versus on constantly trying to bring in new customers while have our customer bases walking out the back door because we're not paying attention to them. So customer experience became my passion. And 3 years ago, I went off on my own and started The Experience Maker and haven't looked back. So today I'm a speaker mostly, but I also do some coaching and I also do content creation for a number of clients.
So you wrote The Experience Maker, How to Create Remarkable Experiences That Your Customers Can't Wait to Share. Nice forward as well from Ann Handley, we talked about earlier. Great writer as well, loved her point. But where does this sit between marketing and customer experience? Kind of elaborate a little bit further on that.
Yeah, so I'm a believer, having come out of corporate America, that all marketers need to be well-versed in customer experience. Marketing has become one of the central points of the experience. And let me explain that. First of all, marketing is often the first part of the experience from the customer's perspective, right? How do we become aware of a company? We see an advertisement or we see marketing. That's often the first time we've ever experienced them. And what I think companies sometimes miss is we call it customer experience, but the overall experience from that person has already begun before they're a customer, right? We see marketing and it makes us laugh. We've already made a determination about that brand. We see marketing and we don't see ourselves in the marketing, and we've made a determination about that. So the experience has already begun. I also think that marketers have such an important role of really promising the experience. If you think about what marketing does, it basically tells people this is what it's going to be like to do business with us. This is how you're going to feel when you drive our car. This is how our pizza is going to taste. This is, what it's like to whatever it is, whatever product you're selling. You're basically selling the experience. So I think this is a book certainly for customer experience and customer service people, but I think marketers, and this is intentional, I think marketers will get a ton out of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I talk about this a lot. We often use promises as metrics, thinking that as marketers, we can manage this entire process with shiny advertisements and everything else about the experience. But no, I loved it. So I love as well that you point out in the intro about the customer of your customer. I know that I've mentioned this a gazillion times on this show and on stages. I don't think it's considered nearly enough by brands who either engage agencies or consultants, or by the agencies and consultants themselves who help make these promises to brands. But talk about the value of the customer of your customer, since so many of us work in a B2B environment.
Well, it's funny, Kenneth, because for a while when I would get off stage after doing a keynote, invariably somebody would run up to me and say, I work for a B2B. I love your content. I love what you have to say, but does this apply to B2Bs? And I kind of perfected an answer, which I will admit is slightly sarcastic. I would get a very straight face and I would say, well, that depends. Do you market to human beings? And then I would just let that sit for a moment. And then it would settle and they'd be like, well, yeah. Like, well, then it really matters, because at the end of the day, you're not selling to a building, you're selling to a human. There's a human buyer on the other end, and that human is a consumer. So even though they're buying a business product, they're buying a B2B service of some sort, they shopped on Amazon yesterday, or they had a great experience at a restaurant yesterday, and that's what you're being compared to, whether you want to be or not. Having that additional understanding that that customer has his or her own customers, and that he or she needs to deliver an experience to them, and probably is using your service to do it, makes it so important, right? Because if you can't see all the way to that finish line, if you can't see how that end user is using your product, not just your own customer, then you're not going to create the right experience for them.
So you talk early on in the first chapter about traditional marketing not being enough. Unpack that a little bit further about how you see traditional marketing and how marketers need to look at this differently.
Well, as I said, I became exhausted at all marketing. Whether it's email campaigns or social media campaigns or direct mail or television, whatever, like shoot me now, right? I'm tired of it. And as a consumer, I'm tired of it, right? We're all tired of our scrolls being interrupted. We fast forward through commercials. Even when we're listening to podcasts, if the host starts to do a commercial read, we fast forward 30 seconds to pass it by. So I think there's a lot of just tiredness over being marketed to. And that's why I think traditional marketing is not enough anymore. Because if that's all you're doing, first of all, you're only focusing on prospects and trying to bring in new customers, and you're ignoring the customers that are already there. That's a huge miss. And second of all, it just doesn't work as well as it used to. I'm not saying don't market. I mean, marketing's not going away, but if the companion isn't there where you are focused on the experience of your existing customers, then a lot of your marketing goes to waste, because you spend all this money to bring a customer in and then they don't stay because the experience is terrible. So if we think about how much our acquisition costs are, and in so many areas, acquisition costs are going up, we've got to make sure that when we actually are successful in bringing a customer in the door, that we get them to stay a while. Otherwise, our marketing dollars were lost.
Well, in chapter 3, you talk about the case for customer experience. And what I often focus on for me is the revenue impact that this makes at the C-suite, what they listen to in order to make a choice on investments. However, a lot of marketers are still looking at it through whatever numbers and metrics that exist that help them deliver what they're trying to deliver. How do you get marketers to really sort of reshape their focus? Because again, they're being asked to a lot, at least if you're not at the C-suite, a lot of managers or people underneath those managers or directors are simply trying to hit a number as opposed to an experience that keeps a customer rather than just bring in a new one.
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of always focusing on the bottom line, because that's what your executives care about. So I spent a lot of time in social media, and it's kind of funny. I chuckle because so many social media marketers just sort of decided at some point that calculating the ROI of social media was impossible. So they just weren't going to do it. And I laugh at that, because we've been able to calculate the ROI of every other marketing channel, right? We can figure out what an email campaign is worth or what any other channel is worth. I think that some look at customer experience the same way, and they look at it as sort of a soft skill that doesn't have hard numbers behind it. That's completely wrong. And so what we have to do is connect what we're doing in customer experience back to the numbers that executives care about. You mentioned revenue, that's one half of the equation. Cost is the other half of the equation. So what kinds of revenue get brought in through customer experience? Well, number one, we end up attracting more customers, because customers of today want to do business with companies that have a great reputation for treating their customers well. So we bring in more customers. Our customers stay longer and they spend more. So that adds to the revenue. And then probably most importantly is that happy customers tell other people. And that, again, finishes the cycle of bringing in more customers. Is that our referral rate goes up. But also when we provide a great experience, Our customers don't have to call in to complain nearly as much, right? They don't. Think about when you call customer service, which is a huge cost for so many companies. We don't call just to say, hi, you're doing a great job. We call because we're having a problem. So if we've done our work and we've created an experience that is seamless, that doesn't require the customer to call in the first place, now you're talking about massive cost savings as well. So you put that together of revenue generation and cost savings, and that's what you talk to the executives about. It's kind of like the difference. Let's think about an email campaign for a moment. If I walk into the CEO's office and say, hey, I just did a new email campaign, and guess what? Our open rate crushed it. We got a 50% open rate. He's like, so what? They opened our email. Awesome. Did they do anything with it? Did they? Okay, even if they clicked through, hey, our click-through rate was great. Fantastic. What does the executive care about? Did they purchase? Did they did they do what we wanted them to do? I don't care how much they open or click. Those are great numbers, but they don't tell me how it affects the bottom line. So always take your metrics, really wherever you are, marketing, customer experience, whatever, take your metrics and create that tie to the bottom line.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the WISE method: witty, immersive, shareable, and extraordinary. Later on, you talk about being witty, not the funny witty, but more like being clever. And one of the examples you use is a gas station with a clever sign. I love that one. I bought a bunch of gas over the weekend, so it's WISE front and center to mind to me. But gas is $2.99, but customer service is priceless. Now, if this gas station is across the street from another gas station selling gas at the same price, do you choose this one or the one selling 99-cent bottles of soda? You choose this one because of a couple of words on their sign that makes it feel more like a welcoming place. That's witty, and I get it and agree. I would do the same, but thinking about what you just spoke about, I think goes with this question as well. What do you tell the marketer who's selling against somebody who's got a nickel cheaper, or whether the gas station that uses that simply as a marketing ploy? I love when you point out that they've got to be able to fulfill that promise. And I guess what I'm worried about was that CX is becoming a lot more popular than it used to. And I love the focus on it, but with great power comes great responsibility, to lean into Spider-Man. This is becoming, I worry a little bit about this becoming more of a tactic than a practice. And for a lot of consumers, it may be too late once they've spent their money. So how do we build witty and still fulfill a promise?
Yeah, great question. So witty to me is about being clever, using language to your advantage, and refusing to be boring. And today's customers, especially younger customers, want that from brands. They want some personality. They want you to show the human side of your brand. And so, there's a great example. One of my favorite follows on Instagram is El Arroyo restaurant in Austin. It's a Tex-Mex place in Austin that actually, if you go to the Yelp reviews, does not get particularly great reviews. However, they have a sign out front that they change every single day that is so hilarious that, and that's all their Instagram feed is their sign every day. That I'm telling you, if I'm in Austin, I'm going there, right? Because it's become a destination in itself because it's created a personality. Think about how many Tex-Mex restaurants there are in the country, and El Arroyo has stood out because it has a sense of humor, and it shows
especially in Texas.
Especially in Texas, right? That is, I guess, where a lot of Tex-Mex are. So it's just about finding opportunities. I always say, every time we communicate with a customer, it's an opportunity to create an experience. We don't do it. We don't take that opportunity, but it is an opportunity. If you're sending a customer an invoice, if you're sending them a contract, if you're having to call a customer, email a customer, there's always an opportunity to create an experience where one doesn't exist. And I think the companies that people really tend to love have figured that out and have figured out how to be truly personalized, not just pretending to be personalized. You and I were talking about this before we started recording about how many times I'm referred to as Daniel by banks and what have you, which to them sounds like personalization, but to me sounds like nails on a chalkboard, because no one calls me Daniel
Right.
other than my mother when she's mad at me. So I don't want to be called Daniel, but they've never taken the time to ask me what I'd prefer to be called. So it's little things, but it establishes a personality. It's kind of like having a colleague at work that's just totally dull and answers you in like one word sentences and like it's like pulling teeth talking to that person versus a colleague who's like kind of the office clown, right? Who do you want to hang out with, right? The office clown's going to be a lot more fun, and you're going to want to spend more time with that person. And brands are way too often just too stoic and too boring. And I love the word boring because I get lots of people that come up to me after my speech and say, hey, oh, everything's great, but I'm in a boring industry. Like, yeah, I worked in financial services. I worked in insurance. Like, those are pretty boring industries as well, but they don't have to be boring. They just are. And one great way to stand out is to not be like everybody else.
Yeah. Now, after what we were talking about earlier, makes me think I can rarely remember anybody even asking for nicknames anymore. Every blue moon, I'll get one that says, hey, Shark, if I put it out there, but it's rare and they're just getting my name wrong. So how do we make these more immersive?
So being immersive is about creating a consistent experience throughout the journey. If you've ever had the occasion to, say, buy a B2B software service, right, at work, you get to know the salesperson. You will often make a decision because you like the salesperson. I mean, we buy from people that we like. That's human nature. You go to sign the contract, and you've got a little bit of fear of buyer's remorse. Oh man, I hope this is the right decision. I don't want my boss mad at me, whatever. And then as soon as you sign the contract, that salesperson that you really liked kicks you over to a different team and says, later, I got to go sell somebody else. Well, how does that make you feel? Right? You're sitting there saying, man, I hope I made the right decision. And I bought it because I liked Shark, the salesperson. And now the second the ink is dry, Shark is off to somebody else, doesn't care about me anymore. And so being immersive is looking for those moments where there are handoffs or transitions in the experience and making sure that they remain smooth, that you don't leave your customer standing there being like, what just happened? Because unfortunately, it happens quite a bit. Sometimes we know that a lot of people shop across channels, right? You might start in the store, look something up on your phone, and then go home and go to the website. Well, if all of the information isn't the same, if there's different prices in all of those places, for example, that's a really confusing experience. Being immersive means
100%.
making sure it all fits together.
Shareable ideas. What were some of your favorite shareable ideas that you uncovered, and how should marketers go about using those?
Sure. So I should say the book is filled with real life examples. To me, that's the most fun way to learn and the most fun way to teach. And so for this answer, I'm going to give you one of those examples. So I took my son to Fleming's Steakhouse for his 15th birthday. It was his choice. And we walked in, and not the MC, the
Maitre d'.
maitre d'. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. The maitre d', we walk in, and the maitre d' hands my son a birthday card that is signed by the staff. And I have to admit, I was pretty impressed. I had not seen that before. It's tough to impress a CX person, but I was impressed. Well, what was interesting about that, besides from the card being cool, is that during dinner, there was this anticipation about what was going to happen after dinner. Even my younger daughter said, boy, if they gave Mark a birthday card, they're probably not going to just do a slice of cake and a candle. Like, they're going to do something really cool after dinner. So the card had the dual effect of being a nice gesture in itself and creating this anticipation during dinner. Well, Fleming's did not disappoint. They came out with a box of 4 handmade chocolates made in their kitchens, sitting on a plate with happy birthday spelled out in cocoa powder. And instead of a candle, they had a sparkler, because we all know that a sparkler is so much cooler than a candle. Now, I'm telling you, Shark, because I was there, no one told us to do this. 4 people at the table, everyone grabs their phone. We all take a picture of this beautiful dessert with the sparkler. The adults share it to Facebook because that's what we adults do. The kids share it to Snapchat because that's what the kids do. And boom, Fleming's has 4 positive word of mouth mentions from a single event. And all they did was they looked at what is already a very nice gesture. I'm not saying that a slice of cake and a candle is a bad thing. It's just that every restaurant does it. So it's not shareable. But when you turn it into even just the switch from the candle to the sparkler, makes it totally shareable. And I noted when I took a picture of the sparkler, because our cameras are so powerful these days, you can see each individual spark in the picture. Like, it's really cool. That's what makes it shareable. And so I ask people to use this as a metaphor. Look for a place in your experience where you've got a candle and you can elevate it to a sparkler. It's not more expensive. It's not more complex. It's just more worthy of sharing.
Last but not least, though, that also really ties into extraordinary.
Yeah.
How do companies in general, should they, sort of continue this, if you will? How do they make those experiences extraordinary?
So extraordinary is about taking the ordinary and making it a little bit better. And remembering that most customer experiences that we have are ordinary. That's why we don't share them, right? We know that people share very positive experiences and very negative experiences. Nobody has ever said, let me tell you about the perfectly average restaurant I went to last night. That just doesn't happen. So if everyone else is ordinary, and chances are your competitors are pretty ordinary, being extraordinary just means being a little bit better than them. It doesn't necessarily, you don't have to shoot for the moon. And I like to tell people that customer experience does not have to be a multi-year, multi-million dollar transformational thing. It can just be a series of little things. And if you, especially if you can build a culture and teach your employees that everyone can have an impact on customer experience, as you start to make these little things happen, they add up to a lot. And so a candle to a sparkler is not a big thing. It is a little thing, but it's a big difference. And you've also hit on a point that experiences can be different parts of the WISE methodology. They can be witty and shareable and extraordinary together. In fact, the more you stack them, the better the experience is, even though you really only need one of them to create an experience.
Most importantly, though, towards the experience, was the steak extraordinary?
Oh, of course it was. Yeah, the dinner was delicious. Everything was great. The service was wonderful.
Which can get lost in the conversation when we think about all the packaging and all the other stuff, but eventually it's that promise.
Absolutely. And that's true, is that, sometimes if you think about your favorite restaurant that you go to, your favorite steak restaurant, right? It's so consistently good that it is almost hard to stand out, because you go in with the expectation that it's going to be consistently good, and it is consistently good. But you know what? That's why you come back. And so, the thing about, especially as we talk about shareable, right, is that even if the customer doesn't share, the fact that they're coming back again and again, and our mutual friend Shep Hyken's new book is called I'll Be Back, right? That in and of itself is a huge business driver. So even if they don't go tell anybody else, the fact that they keep coming back is obviously great for business.
Agreed. Well, you conclude towards the end with a couple of chapters about implementing this at your company as well, with eliminating pain points. Any high level points that we can look at for eliminating those pain points?
Well, I think with pain points, the best way to find them is to become a customer of your own company, if you can at all. If you absolutely can't, then you need to attach yourself at the hip to an existing customer and kind of go through the process with them. I want you to go through every process. If you have a website, I want you to register for your own website. Then I want you to forget your password and go through the forgotten password process, because we all know how fun that is, right? I want you to be a customer and see what annoys you. And if it annoys you, I promise you it's annoying your customers as well. And so as we pick apart the things that are creating these pain points, we can eliminate them. And I give a long example of when I was at Discover Card and did this, and we won the JD Power Award for the first time. And I believe this was absolutely connected, is, customers understand today that companies will make mistakes. I actually think for the most part, customers can be pretty forgiving. It depends on what happens when you make, what happens next. How do you resolve the mistake? But ultimately, we also don't appreciate death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like, at some point, if you just keep aggravating me a little bit at a time, I'm just going to throw up my hands and I'm going to say, I'm just going to go somewhere else, because I'm kind of tired of this. And so that's why eliminating pain points is such an important piece of the puzzle.
Well, if you're any decent sized company, become a customer and try to hunt for the phone number to find somebody to help you fix your problem.
Oh, it's so funny you mentioned that, because I think I briefly mentioned this in the book. One of the companies I worked for, the executives all had their own personal customer service number that they could call that was basically the VIP line. It got them to a supervisor. And I remember being asked if I wanted access to it. And I said, absolutely not. I want to call, I want the experience just like a customer gets it, because I want to know what it's like to either wait on hold or to get to a representative that maybe can't answer my question, and whatever. If you're a CEO and you're going through the VIP line every time, how can you possibly relate to what your customers go through?
So you as a speaker, I'm curious what stories in the CX world resonate best with your audiences on stages?
Great question. I will tell you the brand that sticks out the most, and that more people than any other brand that I talk about come up to me afterwards and say, "I got to tell you my story," is Chewy. Chewy is the online pet supplies company, and if
You
you're
write
a
about
pet
it in the
owner,
book.
yeah, Chewy. I mean, they do so many amazing things. I don't even know where to start. They're well known for when a pet dies, they send flowers and a condolence card. Think about that. The customer just ceased being a customer, and they're sending them flowers. But they're smart because they know that almost every pet owner down the road is going to get another pet. I tell a lengthy story in the book about a woman who left a negative review about a product that isn't even Chewy's product. And what happened next was unbelievable in terms of just the service level and how they were able to turn a negative experience into brand advocacy. And that's the brilliant part, right? It's like, oh, this woman actually had a bad experience. She bought a product that she didn't like from you, and now she loves you even more. Amazing, right? That's what Chewy is so good at doing. And they've just built it in. They built it into every touch point. They built it into their culture. Their employees are, and they're all pet lovers, so they can relate really well. And it feels like you're buying from a friend because they know pets. They know what it's like to have pets. They you know they ask you names of your pets, and then they use it in their communication, and they say, "How's Oma, my dog?" Or Oma's up for her medicine is up for renewal, or whatever it is. And it's just such a great experience working with them. So they're one of those companies a lot of people respond well to.
So one of the things you offer, it's a freebie, is the 10-day CX challenge. Tell us about that.
Yes, it's part of the book, but it is also available to your listeners as well. Just go to 10daycxchallenge.com and use the number 10. And every day you're going to get a 90-second video from me, but you actually don't have to look at my ugly mug. You can just listen to me, because it's one of those whiteboard videos where you've got like the hand drawing on the whiteboard. And every day there is a new tactic that you can grab the team. It's actually a fun team building activity, but a new tactic that you can employ at your company that is easy to do. It's not expensive. You can start doing it that day. And when you do all 10, you've really made a whole lot of progress to becoming a customer-centric company.
Great. Well, Dan, you're in Chicagoland, and so that's water's a little colder up there. But I asked this of all of my guests on a shark's perspective: what is your favorite kind of shark and why? Do you have a shark experience story? I do know you have met Barbara Corcoran.
I was going to say that's where I was going. Mark Cuban is my favorite shark for sure. And Barbara, I did get to meet Barbara and get a signed copy of her book. And I was the only one in the line of 300 that gave her a signed copy of my book at the same time, because I was like, why not? But yes, I do not swim with the sharks nearly as often as you do, but I do watch Shark Tank and love it. And I watch it with my kids. I think it is great. It's great programming for kids and teens to just believe that they can do anything with a great idea.
Could not agree more. Well, Dan, this is a special time in the show where we get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I am ready.
All right. Your family's old business appeared in the scene of the Blues Brothers. So question number 1 is Dan Aykroyd or John Belushi?
Definitely Belushi.
And I just saw Aykroyd in the new Ghostbusters, the new-ish Ghostbusters movie. Still reminded me of Belushi and how brilliant he was.
Yeah, and one of my favorite unsung movies is Taking Care of Business, which stars Jim Belushi. And as you mentioned, I'm from Chicago. The Cubs
He's a
win the World
Chicago,
Series
yeah.
in that movie, so
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons I loved it.
All right. So I've asked this question to somebody in the CX customer service world as well. It reminded me when you said that you'd worked for McDonald's or with them on marketing stuff. Number two is quarter pounder or the Big Mac.
Absolutely, the quarter pounder. Don't even have to think about it. I think that's the best sandwich on the menu with cheese
Best sandwich in relative terms, though,
on
on
their menu.
McDonald's menu.
On
Yes.
their menu,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. All right. Number three, you're a licensed bartender. Which of these difficult to make drinks would you prefer making if asked by a customer to choose? The Commonwealth or the Ramos Gin Fizz?
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I probably couldn't make either one of those right now, but I am a gin guy, so I'm going to go with the gin fizz.
Okay, so the Ramos is the one down in New Orleans where they shake until you can't shake anymore. And the Commonwealth has 71 ingredients. This was, according to liquor.com, two of the five most difficult ones to make. And I would just take a good old whiskey sour or
fair enough,
something like that. So I read on your site where you'd sung the national anthem at 3 Major League Baseball stadiums. Which stadiums were they?
Wrigley Field, whatever they're calling Comiskey Park these days, and Miller Park up in Milwaukee.
Okay, great stadiums. So with you being such a big baseball fan, if you had a choice of baseball movies to watch, which would you choose? We'll go west of you, Field of Dreams, or east of you with Major League.
So I'm glad you mentioned that one. Major League is not just my favorite baseball movie. It is not just my favorite sports movie. It is my favorite movie.
Really? Yeah.
So Major League for the win.
I just watched it again not that long ago, and be glad I didn't ask you Rookie of the Year with the Cubs or 8 men out with the White Sox. So
I'll tell you, Major League. Hopefully you agree. It holds its own all these years later. It's still funny. It's still relevant.
So many actors too that are still big today. When Wesley Snipes,
yeah, it was great.
Tom Berenger, so many good actors.
Rene Russo,
Bob Uecker, one of the most brilliant announcers of all time, and in that movie was fantastic.
Absolutely.
All right, and number 5, and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread.
Ooh, it's a tough one. I'm going to go with cornbread if I had to choose.
You're in corn country, so it makes sense. Dan, where can people find out more about you, get a copy of the book, keep up with what you're doing and more?
Sure. So dangingiss.com is the best place. It's DANGINGISS. Also very active on LinkedIn and Twitter, especially. The book is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever you want to buy books. And we didn't talk about it, but the R in my Wiser framework is being responsive. And I practice what I preach. So if you reach out to me, I will be happy to respond to you if you have questions or comments. Dan@dangingiss.com. Would love to connect.
Great point. Dan, thank you so much again for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you, Shark.
So there was my conversation with Dan Gingiss, keynote speaker, customer experience coach, and the author of The Experience Maker, How to Create Remarkable Experiences That Your Customers Can't Wait to Share. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, love this quote from Dan. I'm a believer, having coming out of corporate America, that all marketers need to be well-versed in customer experience. I share that belief, having worked in corporate America for multiple brands as well, for agencies and consulting firms, for publishers, in big data, and as a solopreneur and entrepreneur. We all should find a better way to understand the world our customer sees. Customer experience begins before they become a customer, and marketers have a role with that end promise to customers. Second, in a side conversation, I told Dan offline how much I appreciated the B2B comment with responsibility to the customer of your customer. I've said this many times on this show. Agencies own some of the responsibility. Again, it's part of that promise. And remember, every agency on the planet says that they are, in air quotes, an extension of your team. You have to think about the end customer and not just the B2B logo or building, as he said, when you're selling this promise. That understanding makes it incredibly important for all marketers to understand. Third, we as customers are tired of marketing, tired of the campaigns. Your consideration, and I cover a lot of this in my upcoming book, should also include consumers who are part of that experience but haven't bought yet. Then ask if your customers later will enjoy your marketing, or do they skip forward like everyone else until they end up in the arms of another brand. So show them more love. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. I'm so thankful to everyone who listens. Please consider writing a review and letting me know your thoughts on the show. It's time to go out there and create a remarkable experience of your own, and I hope that you'll join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.